You've already met Melissa and Pam. I want to introduce Mike Smith from the city of Albuquerque, who's the director of the Public Service University. And Mike, if you could just kind of give a brief overview of your department and kind of what you do, what's involved with WorkKeys, what you've been up to, that sort of thing, and then we'll get to the questions.
Thanks, and thanks for this opportunity. Public Service University is the learning and training arm of the city of Albuquerque. We're housed within the HR department. We oversee learning for the city, but we got into the recruitment business when Jemay did one of her famous walk-ins to the mayor's office about almost 24 months ago and says, "I have a deal for you." Then the mayor said, "Well, good, I have someone to do this," and I became the project manager for bringing WorkKeys to the city. To date, we have almost 10 jobs profiled and are actually hiring using WorkKeys for all 10 jobs. And I want to thank Tom. I mean, get to know Tom real well, because Tom's a great person to have there to get you started and to get you running and to moving forward with it. So Tom, thank you for all the support you gave us. Okay, yes it is. Don't cash it, okay? So right now what we do with WorkKeys is we're doing all the testing. Primarily, anyone that applies for a WorkKeys required city job, it's posted that WorkKeys is required. They come to us and have to take the WorkKeys tests that have been profiled. We've had great success. We actually went live in July. It took us about a year to get all the profiles done, get the systems put in place, get a testing center built, figure out what we're doing with this to bring it and to run live with it. And in the short term, we've seen gains. We've seen some pretty great success, and I'll answer those questions when you ask me those types of questions. So that's what we do, along with professional development. We've actually taken the WorkKeys Key Trade model and embedded it into a lot of our professional development programs for aspiring managers, and all 1,200 managers that I have at the city right now are taking WorkKeys. That was the best way for me to educate them on what the tool does as it becomes a hiring tool for us. So that's what we do at Public Service University.
Thanks, Mike. Just from the attendees, can you please just stand up quickly if you are an employer here attending, just to get a, okay. Okay, great, thank you. All right. So we've kind of bunched the questions together, and as we've seen, WorkKeys is an extremely powerful tool, but it's not a standalone unit that just operates by itself. There's still other criteria that employers need to use to screen candidates. So this question revolves around the candidate selection process, and the question is, how do you assess an applicant's fit for your organization, and what parts of the selection process work well? So who'd like to address that from the panel?
I'll take that one first.
Thanks,
so
Mike.
Remember that wonderful slide that Mary Leah put about all the things that didn't work? Well, that's what we previously did. Everything that didn't work, and we were able to look at that slide and say, well, no wonder we were getting the same things, thinking we were trying something new and nothing was changing, especially in our high turnover jobs. So it wasn't working. Now what we're finding by doing some job profiling and bringing in the WorkKeys in the three areas that we've done recent hiring over at transit, at solid waste, animal handler, and over in our traffic engineering, we've reduced the number of people that have to be interviewed, because now we're just interviewing people that have the skills. A great example was recently over at transit. The transit director was like, I have to hire 23 people. So we had 400 applications, 200 qualified. In the past, what would they do? Interview all 200. They interviewed 23 and hired 23, because we had 23 that passed. I mean, so it's helped us, and now they're in that job training phase. You know, same thing just recently happened over at solid waste. We had to hire 20 recycling drivers for a new program. In the past, it was the same thing. Do you breathe? Can you walk to the interview? Okay. Do you have a CDL, right? And you have 3 years experience driving with your CDL. And it would take them about 12 weeks to go through the interview process. We're reducing it down to 2 weeks for them. I mean, so that's what it's done for us, that we're having conversations with the right people, not everybody, but just the right people. That's what it's done for us.
I think the only thing I can add to that is, you know, in my business, I guess we like to call it instead of the high tech, it's the high touch business. And so we tried to quantify those characteristics of successful employees, and caring, compassion, with scenario questions. So in our interview process, we interviewed, some of the typical questions. But then we did some what-if questions and gave some scenarios to find out how people thought in situations and what they come up with in situations. So some of what we have tried to do is less about yes and no and tell me your experience and 5 years here and 2 years here. And into more what if. What if you had a situation where you had a person with a disability and that person with a disability couldn't talk? What kinds of techniques would you use to find out something about that person? And listen to them talk about, well, I'd observe this or that, or maybe I would observe their facial expressions. Maybe I would talk to a family member to find out what that movement means or what this means. So we tried to use those kinds of questions to analyze whether they had that high touch quality we were looking for.
For us, so we have our work keys that we implemented, and then I'd mentioned that we were looking at the workman's comp factor too that went with those employees. So we now require physicals also, that we pay for them. So our screening, once we have them down to a final applicant, the final step is a physical, just to make sure that they can reach the lifting requirements and are in good physical shape, because we had an employee after 3 days that had a hernia surgery. So, I mean, it was a concern. So we just took from work keys, looked at our issues, and then added to it a little bit.
Melissa, I'm just curious, are you starting to ask them if they're afraid of heights?
That's one of my first questions.
Oh, really?
It is, but I always ask it.
I just want to add one thing, because something else has happened, because normally using behavioral-based interviewing, you ask questions like, give us your greatest strength. Yeah, right. Give us your greatest weakness. Well, we don't have to ask that anymore, because we have it right in front of us and numerical scores from work keys. So it's actually changed the way that we interview by reducing the number of questions that we're asking. Because now it's to be more specific to the job versus all this 50% of the questions that we're trying to get a gauge on how they think and how they problem solve. Well, that's done now through work keys.
And Mike, just a point you had mentioned about the number of applications, because there was a question in there as well. How many applications did you used to get for a typical City of Albuquerque position, and how many are you getting now for requiring work keys?
It depends on the position. On average, a year, the city gets between 50 to 60,000 applications for jobs. And it's been a manual process, which we're about to change. We're bringing in another new system to change that. But we're not seeing that the number of applications at this time around has reduced. As a matter of fact, we're finding that people don't like to read. Even though we put it in the job application, work keys required, they skip through it and still apply. All right, so the only ones we call are the ones that qualify, and then invite them to come down, those that we might have interest in, they come down and take work keys also, along with the ones that do read and don't apply until they have work keys score. With the new system that we're bringing on board in February, March, if it's a work keys required job and they don't input work keys scores, they won't be able to finish their application. So it'll work with its true intent that we've been looking for. So it hasn't really reduced the number of applications, but not everybody comes in test. Because we find, and mostly it's because, I have to test for this job. And then the other piece that I like that are different, because the question was around what do you do to change your recruiting, it's really changed my dynamic with my organization also, is now when a person walks in and doesn't get the score they quite want, I'm not only in workforce development for city employees, I'm in workforce development for potential employees, and that sends a different message as an employer to a potential employee that, we really want you to work for us. We have a way for you to improve. Then we want you to come back and reapply. Okay, and they walk away knowing right off the bat whether they qualify to move to the next step or not. And just looking at and I'm going to say the gleam in their eyes when they come up and say, so what does a 7 in reading mean? And they were a high school dropout. Because the other thing that we did, as we were using on a lot of these jobs, we had this artificial barrier, we called it, as a high school requirement. And the only reason why we had it there, because we had nothing else to put there. WorkKeys allowed us to put something else there. We're dropping that high school requirement on some of these jobs to get the other side of the graph that Mary Leah was talking about, all those people that we missed in the past. Because it's like for drivers. What don't you need to get a CDL in the state of New Mexico? You don't need a high school diploma. It's really amazing how many CDL drivers that don't have high school diplomas that are potential employees that we've missed out on in the past. So that's what it's done for us on that side.
Great. Next question revolves around the theme of roadblocks. What successful arguments have you utilized to sell WorkKeys to your decision makers, and what resistance or objections have you encountered in trying to implement the system?
Well, I'm the decision maker. I feel like George W. Bush. I'll pass it on to you.
We actually, when we talked to James, I had already been looking online for something, and we were willing to pay as a company to have the employees take it. So there wasn't an issue of whether or not we were going to do it.
So speaking from a governmental standpoint, okay, the only way that I would take on the job to do this, I told them, keep the politics out of it. Let's treat it as a business process at first, and that's what it is. We'll bring the politics in it later. Okay, you'll have your chance to stand there with a baby and smile and say, great, this works. Because I don't want it to stop from putting the business process in place. And we got that go-ahead from our champions in the first year. They let us put it together as a business process. You know, the bottom line, that was the first roadblock. That was easy to get over. The other roadblock was the actual hiring managers. You know, and their biggest concern was some of the things that came up. You're going to reduce the size of my applicant pool. I mean, and our argument to them had to be, well, you can have a large applicant pool and you're spending all this time hiring, but you're getting the same results. What's not working here? Take a chance. And it was going out to those champions, and we had 9 of them that said, okay, let's give it a shot. You know, you keep it small, you keep it concise, you keep it very specific. We stayed with jobs that were department specific, in our case, ones that didn't go across like a clerical job. We can hire them in all 21 departments. Well, Tom and I were saying that's a profiling nightmare because of the EEOC requirements. But we kept things that were low skill, moderate skill level, even though they were entry-level positions, and we call them that. Don't let it fool you, as Tom made a comment. These are decent people going after dignified jobs that have a skill, as he knows from riding on garbage trucks, shooting firearms, cleaning the tiger cage. We tease them all the time, you know, riding a bus all day. I mean, these are good jobs. Okay, but let's keep it simple, keep it very specific, start small, so you can get used to the system, and especially the employee pool, the recruitment pool that you're going after. They've never been asked to do this before. You know, you have to make it comfortable for them to come in and not make test-taking a threatening thing, because you might shy away away of potential recruits because they're not used to taking tests. Make it inviting, show them that if you don't get the score that you need, we have a remediation for you. And we're happy to have C&M Connect on board for us to take those people that we see that need high touch, just someone to talk to one-on-one, to take them through the key training process or show them how to dress for an interview if they get to the next stage.
Mike, real quick, what about the unions? Because a lot of your jobs are unionized.
I would say about 85% of our jobs are unionized. We've had no resistance from the union whatsoever, because we've sold it, and they were sitting in on some of your profiles. Also, it's amazing what's nice about the profiling process. That helped us get through a barrier, because who's telling them about the job? The people that actually do the job. So they got involved in the process in a very high-touch way, because they knew right from the onslaught what this was about. You're telling us about your job. We're going to assess your job based upon what you're saying that you do. Well, they don't get that option that often. This platform allows them to do that. And the job profiles are a wonderful tool beyond WorkKeys. It's a wonderful workforce development tool. You get a snapshot of a job probably that you've never had before from the people, and you learn things about the job that no one would ever tell you. So I could actually say, wow, maybe we need to change the job description. We need to provide training in these areas. Wow, we never know this happened. We need to formalize that process. So it's a very valuable tool just beyond here's a WorkKeys requirements. But the unions so far, they see it as a promotional opportunity and actually a way for us, which we're trying to set up now, using it to create career ladders.
Thank you. We talked about HR directors before. Mike, you had mentioned them. What changes do HR directors need to implement into the hiring process?
Well, let's ask the HR director.
Let's ask the HR
Yeah,
director.
let's ask the HR director.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I know, right? Like James and Tom explained that if you don't have your profile but you would like to do the WorkKeys, you cannot say it's required. It has to be preferred, requested. And actually that's sometimes, I'm sorry, what? Recommended. Yeah, recommended. And actually I found if I say request, that helps too. Would you mind if I requested if you take this test and so that way we can see how you do for the job criteria? That seems to, so it's kind of all about wording it. But that's the main thing, I think. And I just hand it out right away with it. So there's really no difference in it. And then just ask them to bring it back. And they do get the paper right then. So you can tell the really dedicated employees for us because they have access to us right away. If they come back in 4 hours and they've done 3 tests, they're serious. If it's 3 weeks and they come back with 1 test, then you're like, because that's only an hour, so.
I can say from our experience is a concern that we're going to have an applicant pool. I mean, if my HR director was here, she would say, I'm concerned that we're going to have a big enough applicant pool to fill our positions. It really is, it's also, when you do 24/7, it's also more about who's available on weekends and evenings also. I mean, people's lifestyle is such that may not work out. And so that would be the concern as we go forward. We're not quite there yet, that we would limit the pool and have to, reboot.
For anyone that's in an HR decision-making position, okay, whether it's going to be HR director for a large organization or for a small organization, trust the data. It's a mind shift to look at this data that Mary Leah has provided and believe in the data. Okay, so what we've done in the past has shown some scores that it hasn't been working. Well, yeah, that sort of tells us what we've known all along. Okay, trust in the data. Okay, know that you're going to have to change your system. Now, what's nice about this system, it's not a radical shift. It's just a business process shift. That's all that it is. And testing capacity is the key. Okay, but it is a mind shift for HR directors. And I think the hardest thing, at least for the city's HR director, was how we're going to sell this to other directors. It wasn't selling it to the administration because the mayor was bought in, the CEO was bought in, the chief operating officer was bought in. Okay, because they trusted in the data. Okay, but it was, how do I sell this, if you're in a large organization, to the other departments that have hiring mechanisms? And that's, so you turn into a salesman. But it's hard to turn around and say, this is what I know in HR. We've been doing this traditional model for years. Now here's some data that says, oh, we screwed up. Okay, well, it's about shifting it, and it's about change. So it's that changing mindset. And more doesn't mean it's right. Okay, just because you have more people to select from doesn't mean you're always going to get the right people. So it's making that shift in mindset.
Well, for me, it was like, finally, like, we've done everything, Craigslist, and that gets, but it's true, and Yeah, eHarmony. No. But that's a different story. No, but we're also 24/7 too, and so it is true. Like you're like, and maybe it would be different if the economy we may see in a couple years, but right now we're, 50 applications a week for one job, or you have, after the work keys to have 200 applicants still. It's for me in HR to actually see no turnover, less applications, people that I feel comfortable that I can recommend are qualified and send out on the field. I mean, it's a great feeling.
The last thing, it's a shift in business mindset. So the sell has to be really around ROI and ROE, okay? Because if I'm going to save you money and get you people there faster, and you stop that turnaround, okay? That's what we're trying to do is we're trying to stop the rate of the turnaround, okay? Then I'm selling it to you at a higher level, not just from an HR perspective, but from a total business perspective. And that's what the HR directors, from that mindset. Sometimes that's a hard shift for them because you're so used to being in the HR world. So now you're at a different level. Let me sell you the business side of this.
And I think you've already just touched on this now, but are there any other results or benefits that you found from implementing this that you haven't mentioned already?
One thing I guess that I would touch on is that I was saying how we found employees that we wouldn't necessarily choose, and this kind of goes with the soft theory also, is that we have more mentoring now. And like, for instance, there was an employee that we've hired that was a little harder on their word choices. Like, for instance, if we're in a meeting, they would say, "Like I told you." And so, like, something like that, but they do great on work keys. They read all their graphs and everything well, but they just need a little coaching. So, it's let's go to Starbucks and get a coffee, and yeah, exactly, right? And it's a 20-minute, maybe if you change just a couple things about the way you say things, it might go over better in a meeting. And it really, that part has helped, where maybe we wouldn't even looked at them before, so.
The one thing I would mention is just the profile experience itself. We had, I think, 12 or 13 people that Tom profiled, and those people left the meeting so proud of their job. I could tell them they're doing a great job, but this guy from Colorado, this brainy guy, came in and told them they did a good job. And it was like, yeah, and all of a sudden it's like, we got a great job here. We know what we're doing. I told Tom this earlier. As a result of that, we had a woman who hadn't been with our company very long, a bright young woman, and through the experience of just doing the job profile, she realized how important it was for new employees coming in to have someone who trains them, that understands the job, and she wouldn't have applied for this job without going through the profile, but she applied for one of our trainer positions. So she's doing now staff development. It's her first week in staff development. And it all came just from that experience. So I guess that's a, kind of a serendipity.
Great. Okay, the next question revolves around education. And the questions revolve around how can community colleges serve the needs of the business community better? Or have you shared your training needs with educational institutions?
Can I take this one?
Oh, please.
Sorry, I'm passionate about this one. One thing that we see actually that we're lacking on, and I'm not sure where it's coming from, but it's even just when your shift starts at 8 o'clock, that means you should be there at 8:10. And a little bit early, or some of these even basics that we somehow in this last generation we're missing, or you don't text all the way through a shift, but it's those kind of things that somehow aren't getting crossed through to the 18 to 24-year-olds.
The cell phone is in the Bill of Rights. You know that, don't you?
Yeah, right. But when you're 140 feet above ground, but there's
testing the tower, Melissa.
No, see, does it work? Can you hear me now? But some of the ways that you also, like, you hand yourself, like I was saying, like the like I told you, or maybe, I don't know, like an overall general business class that just did basics that I can see, and I think we can all probably see that this generation needs.
We have worked with Doñana Community College. In fact, 40 hours of this knowledge, competency-based knowledge information that comes with direct support staff, which is actually required by our funding source. Everybody that's doing this business in New Mexico has to train the same actual course. And of course, those 40 hours are 40 hours of staff training time, or staff development time, and people going through the course. We pay for training. And so we partnered with them a few years ago, and they are using our curriculum for a credit course in their pre-nursing at Doñana Community College. And then, as part of that class, they come over to our company, and they spend 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours there, shadowing some people doing the kind of work that we do, understanding what community-based healthcare and nursing looks like, visiting with our direct support staff and with other folks. And from that, we recruit people to work part-time, evenings and weekends. These kids are going to college, and so we've gotten folks recruited, and as they come in the door, they already have 40 hours of the competency-based training completed, which helps us. So that's one partnership that I can tell you about.
We have a wonderful partnership with Central New Mexico College, and we just developed one with the University of New Mexico. We just went out there and told them this is what we need, and one is a CNM Connect through the work keys, and the CNM is doing nighttime testing to help us also. We'll help the whole ecosystem. We actually went to them with a couple of our programs that we have work keys embedded with, and they're actually doing some of our teaching for us. You just got to tell them what you need, and I'm happy that they're open to that. But at the same time, I teach graduate and undergraduate level management and psychology courses. And I'll tell you, for the last decade. And what I hear from my students that doesn't happen is the universities don't help them make the connection of how they translate what they're learning in the classroom to the workforce. So I can do it because I get to experience both sides of life. So if there's anything that we need from the employment side is you're teaching great things, they're building some credentials, but help them make that connection. And maybe that connection is nothing more than have them take work keys and explain what that means. You have the knowledge base, you're gaining all this theory, and in some of the universities, private and public, do some great jobs in providing simulations for them to apply what they're learning in a college setting or provide internship programs. But how do you help them become employable? How do you help with that disconnect? And maybe it's as simple as saying, and we're hearing that Doñana's doing it, is give them work keys.
And we also use a lot of interns, and it's a great way for them to learn. And one of the things I would advise educators is if they're expecting students to have an internship, that they really need to prepare for that internship instead of coming into an employer and saying, I can do it on Wednesday, can't do it on Thursday, Friday's completely out. I mean, it really is less about learning something from the business than fitting into their schedule. And so sometimes we just can't use interns because their availability is not going to allow them to really get enmeshed in a project or anything that we're doing that would benefit their educational experience.
Next question revolves around the skills that employers are looking for, and obviously it's specific to the employer and the positions that are open. But what skills are you looking for in the jobs that you are using work keys for, and what skills need to be further developed?
One of the skills that came out strong in our profile is workplace observation. And I think that we're all going, again, no offense to James, under 30 here, but it seems as if the distractors in our world is such that people really have a hard time, observing the kind of the self-absorbed part of life, really having a hard time observing either their role on a team, or in our case, they're working very closely with our consumers who have significant health needs. They may need to just be able to, if the person coughs, they need to be aware of what that cough might mean. or a variety of other things. And so that seems to be we assume people have that skill, and we can't assume they have that skill, and that's really something we really need to work on, that attention to that detail in workplace observation.
That's actually our number one, and I have 2 words: gopher hole.
Excellent.
So I'm going to say the same thing. Well, in all the jobs that have been profiled at the city, I mean, it's been workplace observation keeps on popping up. Okay, it's workplace. Now, the assessment that we're finding that people aren't passing most frequently is workplace observation. And it's not a very high observation score that we're looking for in most of these jobs. It's a level 2. And I'm getting a population, and through the RI study, we'll find out what that population is, okay, that are getting less than 1. Now, what I find interesting, these are people that we would have hired in the past. Okay, and these are the jobs like police officer. We actually profiled a public safety position. 80 to 85% of their job when Tom did the profile is workplace observation. Okay, but that's never been looked at that way to hire for that job before. Okay, I mean bus driver, CDL drivers, early child care teachers. We've done those. Okay, it's workplace observation. And we were having the discussion the other day saying, well, okay, so of the 3 that we require or 4 that we require for most jobs, if we only had to pick one, if we could only assess one, which would be the one would be the game changer for us? Not that we're only going to do that, but it would be workplace observation. That's the one that we would assess if we only had, and it was just a general discussion, not that we plan on changing anything, but that would be the game changer for us, workplace observation, because of the results that we're seeing. And based on what the profile is telling us, that mostly what our people are doing, most of the time they're engaged in when they get through that stage of learning the job, it's workplace observation.
So you've talked about a number of entry-level positions. Question here is, can work keys be used for highly skilled positions, and has it been used in that way yet?
So I'll talk about a program that we're just starting. So we found a skills gap in the city that was no surprise to us, but we found that at our mid to higher level managers, there was a critical thinking problem. Okay, and we found it through a real work exercise that we asked them to do. So we actually are just launching our first 6 Sigma Green Belt, Black Belt certification in conjunction with the University of New Mexico. It's going to be a year-long program. And what we actually required was them, we didn't put a score to it, but we just wanted to see where they were to take 5 work keys assessments. And it was really funny watching the deputy CAO for the city coming down and taking 5 work keys assessment because the mayor said, you're going in the program. You know, so we had division level and mid-level managers. Have taken, and we're using it because we want to say, okay, we know what people in Six Sigma have to do. Do they have that basic math level needed to get through what they have to do? Workplace observation is a key. Business writing is a key. So at least we know the platform that we're starting with before they go into this intense year-long program. We've used it there, and we're using it in our pre-management development program. So I'm happy to say that we required a pretty high level from our blue-collar workers that we put into a year-long development program to become managers. And they're writing million-dollar business plans. It was really cool. And with their potential that they saw from doing the work keys unlocked this new energy in them to where, wow, this person was driving a bus, this person was working at a landfill, or was someone that was doing administrative assistant type work, or someone that was doing crime stats. And they found this new potential just because it says you have this. Now, I'm happy to say that the 19 people that are graduating from the program in 2 weeks are scoring 5.55s in work keys. And those are pretty impressive scores to score a 5.55. And we're saying, okay, now you're ready to promote. So we're using it in that way to also help them see their potential. What's their ability to learn? They never would have seen that potential before, and the quality of work that they're putting out for us, project plans, business plans that are real plans. These things are going to be implemented in the city. It's just amazing to us. A year ago, they would have never thought of doing that, and we started with work keys with them. ACT actually came in and we became part of their national study for creating a supervisory competency exam, and they use them as a pilot group to start setting the benchmark. So we've been using it for different things.
Well, we haven't been, but that's a good idea. We have a leadership institute, and you know, so they can blame you when they have to take that.
Take the finger out.
Go find Mike.
We haven't used it either for that level.
Well, and to Mary Lee's point with the slides earlier, I mean, it shows transparency in terms of how someone could get to the next step and what they need to do and where they need to improve. So, how, and Mike, you kind of touched on this one before, but how do you integrate WorkKeys into an organization with many entry-level positions? How do you pick where you start?
For us, it was where we knew it would be successful and didn't have a lot of those administrative roadblocks along the way. I mean, we know it'd be very simple to profile drivers of this job type and traffic engineering, entry-level traffic engineering support at this level. And that's where you start, where you know you'll have very little administrative roadblocks or classification roadblocks to move forward. Start small. That's all I can say, is start small so you can get used to the system and have a champion on board. I mean, that's what worked for us, to have the champion on board and know that it's not going to happen overnight. Okay, and testing capacity. I can't say enough about testing capacity and remediation. If a person doesn't get the score that's needed, the last thing you want them to do is walk away with their tail between your legs and saying, what do I do next? That could be your best employee, because that person took the time to spend 3 to 4 hours to come down and shed their soul on a test. I mean, on an assessment. And we have people that get test anxiety that we say, calm down, relax. Okay, well, this is not the type of assessment that I'm used to. No, this is not an academic assessment. And we try to, before they actually go into a testing session, we sit down with them, we have a mantra that we go through with them to prepare them. It takes about 10 minutes, so they're a little more relaxed doing this. But start small, start very specific. You want a success, so don't take your biggest problem. Take one that's an issue, but you know that you can actually learn how to use the system. That's where you start. Don't go for the biggest problem first. Start very small.
And that's a perfect segue into our final question. Let's say that each of you are on the rail runner, and you walk in and you see an employer just outside, and the doors are about to close, and they say, please, please tell me your top 3 things in terms of how to make skill-based hiring successful, or suggestions you have for us. What would those be? Before the meet comes.
Well, I don't have a rail runner in Thursday. My door's closed. Okay, so top 3 things to
It's
make
some
it
advice
successful.
for employers for them who want to implement.
Okay. I would definitely say, if like it's what you want, it's selling it. It's selling it to the person ahead of you. It's selling it to the applicants. It's selling it to the staff. It's really, this is a great thing for our organization, and even the already existing employees, because if you can get them to go take it too, it's really, it helps you to look at moving up internally. And then I guess the commitment to it, and because it would have been easy to be like, you know, I really wanted to hire this guy and he didn't come back, maybe I should just call him, you know, or something like that, because the first couple weeks, well, you just start kind of second guessing yourself. Like, for instance, we had a great applicant, and the owner of the company was like, well, he didn't come back. And I'm like, I know. And he was like, I thought he'd come back, you know? So I think it would just be trust in the process. And like the third one, I don't know.
Yeah, well, between the 2 of us, we'll come with, well, we're between you guys and a drink, so we're share this. I would say the third one would be what's in it for whomever. What's in it for me, for whatever level that you're that you're talking to, because I think that's the buy-in that you're going to get. You have to get it at every level. I mean, if you can get your managers to buy in and your supervisors to buy in, and I think the people I need to get buy-in are the ones that interview every day, all those people that they just, as soon as they walk in, they say, do I have to interview this person? Yes, you have to. If they don't have to interview those people, that group's going to be really happy.
So I want to take it from the premise this person is curious about. So number one is educate everybody in the whole loop. So not only educate your staff, educate your managers, but educate the employee, the potential employee about what they're getting into. The second P is have a strong champion. You need a strong champion at different levels. It's not just a champion at the executive level, you need a champion at the work level. Treat it as a business process, okay? Really map out the process. It's not going to solve, and WorkKeys is not going to solve all your problems. I mean, it's going to help you pick a better qualified candidate, but if other pieces of the business process, once they get on board, are broken, they're not going to want to stay. It'll help you get a better candidate, but also helps you recognize, and this helped us do the profiling process, looking at the other business pieces that you might have to change. If it's a bad work environment, you're just going to get a more qualified person coming into a bad work environment. What's the thing that you still have to change? The work environment. So it'll help get you the person you want. Okay, but you're still responsible for doing the other things that you have to do once you get them.
Can I just add one thing
Sure, Tom.
that Mike was ingenious in doing, that I learned from, is once they were committed to doing WorkKeys, he took a project management approach to getting it done. He laid out the calendar, he had it organized, this is the steps we're going to take, he shared it with everybody, and it was a project management approach to get where he wanted us to go with the program. And that's why he's where he's at today as a city. And all the work that we've done in the last year is he just said, it's a project that needs to be managed, here are our deadlines, here's our timeline, we're going to get it done. And I really applaud you for taking that approach.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree.
I'll buy you a drink later. Gin and tonic, right?
They're free.
You kept me real busy. I had to
Tequila.
Gin and tonic and steak. Keeps Tom happy.
Thanks for raising that point, Tom. Okay, on that note, that was our final question. Let's give our panel a